So here's our example. We have some keys, some key movement, but there's two major flaws. Well, there's a few flaws, but two of the first apparent major flaws should be one. Notice what happens when I push the right arrow. I'll push the right arrow, and the ship, it'll move a little bit, and then it'll start moving very quickly. So it's like pop, 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 pop. Let's go left. Pop, 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 pop. Well, that's not going to enhance any gameplay experience if I have to wait just that split second amount of time to make my ship move. Definitely not ideal. And then if I push left and right at the same time, or no, left and up at the same time, we just go up. We don't go diagonally, so to say. Let's go down and then right, and right's winning, but then I'll hit down, and now down's winning. We're not going both directions at the same time. So that is two major flaws with our current system. Well, let's address one problem at a time, and we'll probably end up killing both at the same time. But if I go right, the reason why we get that slight pause is because GUI libraries, with their event systems, they pause. It's kind of like I push the right arrow and Qt. That's the GUI library we're using here is Qt. It says, hey, oh, the right arrow's down, and it immediately fires an event, and then our ship moves. But then after that split second amount of time, Qt's like, hey, the right arrow, it's still down, guys. Maybe we should like start firing off all these events rapidly. All right, so that's why we're seeing the behavior we're seeing is right. Oh, they still want to keep going. All right, well, let's not rely on that behavior. In fact, hopefully, well, maybe or maybe not. If you're used to GUI programming, maybe you saw this and thought you're going to use GUI events for your game for real. No, what we want to do is in the update, we want to poll. Alright, this is kind of like Qt is pushing the event to us. Instead, in here we want to poll and say, hey, is the arrow key down? 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 Instead of waiting here and say, hey, we'll move when you tell us the arrow key's down. Alright, so we're going to poll. And then also, when this event fires, it only tells us about one key code at a time. It's either up or it's down. It's not left or right or both. It's one or the other, but not both. Okay. So how are we going to fix that? Well, it just so happens to be a function in Windows called GetAsyncKeyState. And this function basically allows us to pull and say, hey, is this button down? Is this button down? Is this button down? All right, and we give it a key code, which is these key codes over here we can use. Hopefully this list looks familiar. It's similar to the one we saw with the Qt library. We can say, hey, is the button down? Is the button down? Now, hopefully, it depends. Depends on how much experience you had. If you haven't had a lot of experience, that's fine. But if you had a lot of experience, you're thinking, Jamie, this is a Windows function. And with the clock class, when we were doing that high performance counter code, that we were calling Windows functions there as well. And what if I want to run my game on more than just Windows? Last time I checked, the Windows Phone wasn't doing very well compared to Android and iPhone development. So what if I want to use that? Well, that's why we abstract. All right, and I'll show you a better way, in the not too far away future. Is that the right way of saying it? In the near future, I'll show you a way to abstract away. And so if we're on Windows, then great, our code will work fine on Windows. And if you want to make an interface that adapts to some other platforms, that's fine as well. But for now, we're going primitive because I think it's easier to learn that way. So how are we going to do that? First, I no longer want the event model. I want to poll for it in the update. And I don't want my update function to get too big. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to say check key state. How about that? We'll just make up our own function. Copy that, go to the header file. I'm going to make that a private function right here. Oops. Say void. And so we're going to check the key state, and then we'll repaint. So then here I'm going to rename this to check key state. Get rid of our argument here. And we no longer need this because we're not going to use the event model. And I think we're looking a little good, except now we don't have E. All right, we have to poll. We have to ask Windows, hey, help us here. All right, so how do we do that? Let me show you. Instead of saying E key here, key up, I'm going to replace this with get async key state vk, and again there's some enum prefixing there just for namespace clashing. I'm going to say vk up. Alright, and if you notice GetAsyncKeyState state, let me bring this back up. It returns a short, which essentially we're going to treat like a boolean. It's 0. If we get 0 back, that means the key is not pressed. Anything else, it is pressed. And integers can be interpreted as booleans that way. So if it's up, then we want to do that. And down here, GetAsyncKeyState vk down. And I'm going to pause the recording so you don't have to painfully watch me type all this out. Okay, fastest typer in the West. We have left and right now. We're going to check key state. We're going to do that every update. So Control F5, let's see what happens. Boom, here we go. Right, left. You see we're not pausing anymore? Right, left. We immediately go the direction I tell it to. Up, down. Now let's try to go two directions at the same time. Left and right, or left and up. Hey, look at that. Diagonal. That's kind of cool. Alright, and that wasn't too hard to do. That's all we had to do was pull. We're just saying, hey, is the key down? Is the key down? We're going to move the ship accordingly. Alright, so what's next? Well, I think for now we're just gonna keep this coupled code to Windows, and then in a few videos I'll show you how to abstract that away to something a little more elegant. But I notice our ship here. I mean, I go left and I go left, and it's kind of like a Geometry Wars control scheme. If you ever play Geometry Wars, basically the ship goes immediately where you tell it to. Whereas asteroids, if you push up, it thrusts up, and it keeps moving up and up and up until you turn the ship around and tell it to thrust the other direction, and so on and so forth. So right now we have a very Geometry Wars type of control, which is if that's the control scheme that you're going for, then great. But if you want this to be more asteroids-ish, where the ship actually rotates when you push left and right and keeps going the way you thrust it, then we need to make some changes. And those changes, I think, are the next best educational move. And I also want that ship to rotate and turn. So that's what we're going to do.